Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, November 1st, 2024, and on the show today, we are going to do the Feedback Friday thing. We will get a question about reorienting beds. We will look back at the first month of this show and send you off with a Friday field note for the road. So let's do it. All right. Well, happy November, everyone. Seasonally speaking, I absolutely love this month. I feel like it's the month that gets some of the least plaudits here in the Northern Hemisphere, at least. But like I said yesterday, I love me some November. It's a lot of hoodie weather, which if I was going to a desert island and I could only take three things, I would at least consider bumping something like food. I don't know, a knife, just so I could bring a hoodie. Hoodies are the best, or maybe I just have an affinity for pockets, but I love it in November because I get to wear a lot of hoodies. Also, the food this time of year is amazing. Sweet potatoes, of course, but also kale and spinach, carrots, sweetened by those first frosts, plus lettuce and winter squash, all the things. I love eating stews as well, but I can't really eat that many stews in like October yet. It just feels a little too early. And that's especially true this October, which was basically t-shirt weather every day, not stew weather. November feels like when I can finally indulge a little bit. That said, the forecast is calling for nearly 80 degrees on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of this next week, plus basically more t-shirt weather for the next 10 days or so. So I probably do still have to hold off a little bit on celebrating my love of November by the looks of it, but soon enough. Finally got a little rain yesterday as well, so that's something new. Compared to most years, it has barely rained at all this year. And then we got a hurricane, and then it hasn't rained since. Once again, demonstrating this is a ludicrous business we are in. Hannah and I got our early voting out of the way yesterday, and huge shout out to early voting and to those poll workers. They're always so nice, and I'm always like, I want to do this. I want to hang out with the poll workers. And it should be said, I'm not always great in a crowd. So for me, it's nice that there is a time I can just roll through calmly before like there's big lines and lots of pressure. So shout out to those volunteers who go there for several days in a row when it's not super busy and there's probably not a ton to do. For those folks who may not be able to get there exactly on election day, or even people who struggle in a crowd like myself. Volunteers in general, you rock. Anyway, it's not just November. It is also Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where I go back through the week and touch on some of what sparked conversation in the comments and messages. Show themes from this week included things like mycorrhizal fungi on Monday, farm franchises on Tuesday, friendly competition on Wednesday, and death on Thursday. So pretty typical week, I'd say. And I just want to reiterate how awesome our YouTube comment section has been and how much I appreciate everyone's insight. You all are amazing. And when I get a few minutes, I try to respond if I can, but just know, even if I don't, that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the time that you took to contribute. I really do. And I try and read absolutely as much as I can. On Monday, I discussed putting beds to rest for the winter, and there was a part of a longer comment from Eileen Smith, 3062 on YouTube, who wrote, "We tarped about a 30 by 30 part of our garden. The Bermuda grass is beyond everywhere anymore. We will leave the tarp on until about early May, then see what, if any, results, and finally killing some Bermuda grass is evident." Now, what Eileen is referring to here is that in that episode, I had mentioned not really recommending leaving tarps on or plastic on for the winter or like for an extended period of time to like put beds to rest. But weed management like this may be the one exception. A lot of growers have had success getting rid of, or at least reining in, noxious weeds like these, like Bermuda grass, by keeping the tarps on for a year before starting a garden. So in that way, it can be an effective strategy. My only concern with your situation is that pulling the tarp in May may not be enough time unless you had the tarps on all summer this year already. Like, just so it's clear, overwintering that tarp, that won't really wear that Bermuda grass out enough to set it back adequately unless you're in like a very tropical environment. And in which case I still would maybe have my doubts. Bermuda can be tough because it really does love the low competition of mulch sometimes. Like if you put compost down, it doesn't necessarily get rid of the Bermuda grass in the way it sometimes does with things like Johnson grass. And ditto things like bindweed. Not all weeds, especially the really heavy duty perennial ones, are mulchable. Anyway, thanks for the comment, Eileen, and they closed it out mentioning they still believed in science, presumably in response to me grumbling at the end of that episode about confirmation bias, which is a relief. Sometimes news and science is not going to be what you want to hear, but that's why it's important. So big shout out to embracing the art of just being wrong about stuff sometimes and not just seeking out that which confirms what you already believe. Being wrong should happen to you multiple times a month, if not multiple times a week, or you're just not doing it right. Unrelated to that, I loved the threads of people talking about AI in the comments from that show, debating what intelligence and cognition are. On a daily farming podcast. I love it. I discussed farm franchises on Tuesday, and it was interesting to see the divide in the comments from people being like, yeah, it could totally work, to others saying, they would never want to start a farm franchise. That just doesn't appeal to them. I don't know that I have a strong opinion either way on farm franchises. On the one hand, I think it would be an extraordinarily difficult thing to even attempt to create a franchise farm as the franchisee, but I can also see scenarios where it creates greater land access and provides new farmers with support and expertise in instant markets they may not normally have from the jump. I also think it could provide farmers with some of the business tools we all end up having to develop on our own anyway, which is itself a huge challenge. Does it take some of the romanticism out of starting a farm? Maybe. But also, when it comes to starting a farm business, the romanticism isn't always all that helpful. It can be a hindrance, to be honest with you. It's why people buy land, and sometimes the wrong land, before creating a business plan. Romanticism is why people force vegetable production on plots that should probably be pasture or forest. Romanticism can create beauty, absolutely, but it can also do the opposite, like when someone moves their partner to the middle of nowhere, away from their friends and community to live off-grid and start a farm from scratch with a few $1,000s. Romantic, sure, but also not a great way to start a business, which, for better or worse, is what a farm is. It's what a farm has to be, or it will just not survive. So perhaps the idea of a franchise, albeit less romantic, could provide a safer, more dependable pathway to the lifestyle one desires with fewer risks. That said, I know when we were just starting our farm, a franchise would have been a tough sell for my wife and me. Absolutely. For example, we didn't take an opportunity to farm land for free and live in a house for free near our family because we knew we'd never be able to own that property. We had another opportunity come our way to farm a larger organic farm nearby, to live there and for free. And the market was already established, which I think was like Whole Foods or something. And we said no to both of those because we wanted our own land and our own farm, which in retrospect was both romantic and dumb, given the quality of both of those opportunities, among others that would have popped up. But we were romantics. And now, 15 years later, we're finally sort of crawling out of the hole dug by starting a business like this, massively undercapitalized. So I am 100% sympathetic to the romanticism thing, but as a recovering romantic myself, I can also say it's not always the best approach. The best approach is respecting that a farm is just a business and it has to be treated as such or it won't last, which is as unromantic as it gets. My advice would be to reserve the romanticism for the life your farm business affords and supplies you, or not. Like I said, I probably wouldn't have listened to me either. That's how confirmation bias works. No one is immune to it, especially not the romantic. Anyway, thanks so much for all the feedback this week. Hopefully I haven't bummed you out too much. There are a lot of good stories about rats and mice and voles under yesterday's episode if you need some uplift. Probably uplift. And then we can all march smiling into the next segment talking about reorienting a garden. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit RimmelGreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast and want to support it, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions get to me, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. One note on questions, I started a new November show thread today at the Patreon page where you can add your questions. I am still going to get to everyone's questions from the October show thread. Some of them I am just looking for an expert to help me with. Others I just haven't gotten to yet, but answers are coming. Again, there are some 260 weekdays in a year, so I can tackle no small amount of questions. So don't be shy. Anyway, today's question comes from Tracy M, and it's a good long one. Tracy writes, I'm thinking of growing on a patch that has been fallow for about 10 years now. It is pretty good soil and had been very productive. It had permanent beds on it, raised but no sides, and they're still pretty much there, undergrass and wildflowers. It is incredibly bumpy to mow or walk across. I could put tarps down. It's about 50 foot by 200 foot. For a while, and with some compost and broad forking, it would probably be good to go. The problem is the beds run the wrong direction and are the wrong spacing for how I farm now. Back when I built these beds, we had frequent heavy rains, and so they are oriented to allow the water to flow straight off down the hill. Our area has become much drier, and compost and mulch have helped manage the few big rain events we do have. I used to grow with beds 4 foot on center and now use 5 foot centers for everything. North to south is also important for what I plan on growing there, as shading out is a problem with my one remaining patch of east-west beds. I think that ignoring the old beds and running new ones perpendicular would be a disaster. I remember you changed the direction of your beds. Do you have any advice? I have a tractor and could scrape the high spots and smooth it out, put down an inch or two of compost, and plant a cover crop. Basically, start over. But I'm worried about the weed seeds and the soil structure. Is there any good way to smooth out this field without compacting the soil terribly? Would it be better to have it plowed or even tilled? Okay, great questions, Tracy, and there is a lot of good stuff in there to tackle. Let's start with, yes, I did have to reorient some of our beds, and it wasn't pretty, but it worked surprisingly well. Let me just take you through what we did. First, I needed to reorient these beds downhill because they weren't draining due to some pre-existing drain tile that poured into that area, which we had not known when we bought the property and could not find all of it when we started digging around looking for it. That plot was just staying too wet, and water was building in the pathways and rushing over the beds, taking compost and soil downhill because we're on a slope. So I didn't really have a choice. Nothing was growing in this area, and so there was inadequate photosynthesis going on and thus inadequate feeding of the soil. And eroded soil is not exactly what I'm about here. So in early August of last year, we replowed the entire area, effectively working in all that compost mulch, and then reformed the beds going the direction we needed them to go, more or less straight downhill. Next, we tarped the beds from early August until mid-September to kill the newly flushed weed seeds. Then we planted a pea and oats cover crop around the 15th of September, which is our winter kill cutoff, meaning that's the latest date in our region where I like to plant cover crops that I want to grow for a while and then die forever. Anyway, then I raked that aside in the spring and planted those beds to potatoes and several other things and had a great season in that plot, which for the 3 preceding seasons had been almost useless. And now I should never have to do that again to that area. It's pretty much set for life. Did I do a little damage to the soil ecology by plowing? Sure, probably did. But my timeline for working on this farm is not the next 6 months or 2 years. I hope to spend the next 20 or so years, or hope that at least someone will spend the next 20 or so years working on that soil and improving it. And there was just no way to really do that with the previous orientation. So that brings me back to your situation, Tracy. If it were me and I really wanted to reorient them, which I should be clear, don't assume the rains won't occasionally return because extreme swings are the new normal. So think hard about whether or not you want to reorient them. But if you did want to reorient them, I would follow the same process I just described. I would not scrape them only because you could be creating a really intense slick of compaction doing that scraping on your soil, depending on what the soil type is and the level of moisture. Perhaps if it was the right level of moisture, you could get away with it. But for me, I think why not just add some good long-term amendments and get that area as well prepared as possible for long-term soil health. I know it does feel and seem counterintuitive, but getting those gardens prepped for robust photosynthesis, which is the primary source of food for our soils, again, and long-term soil health may indeed require a one-time tillage event to reclaim and re-prepare them. And that's okay. No-till is not necessarily never-till. No-till is a contextual practice that takes into account what the soil and the farmer needs for long-term ecological success, allowing them to ultimately reduce and eliminate tillage over time. Never-till is a dogma that may work sometimes, but may also cause more harm than good, especially in the short term. And if you're trying to add a whole foot to the width anyway, you're going to have to do some soil work either way. I mean, And so it's either the scraping or some sort of mounding. Might as well make it worth it and add some compost, some inoculated biochar perhaps, any amendments that are needed. If you're going to take one step back, make it worth it. Make it not a step back at all, but like more of a wind up, because I clearly cannot get through a single episode without a sports reference. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, Tracy, and great question. I love those situational ones, and obviously there's always more than one way to do this. And I feel free to add your 2 cents in the comments section. But until then, when we come back, we will look back. That'll make sense momentarily. Be right. I wish I had a different word to use than back there, but be right back. So our work has always been about keeping farming information as free and open to the public as we possibly can, and that won't change. One way in which we make that possible, though, is through advertising on podcasts like this, on our YouTube channel, on our forum, and so on. So if you are a small farm-related company selling seeds or tools or something growers could use, or if you're an organization putting on some conference or offering a grant or looking for farmer contributors or something else farm-related that I'm not thinking of, get in touch with us at farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com. That's farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com. Supporting us helps to grow this work and grow farmers. So we all thank you. Again, that email is farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com, or you can find our contact information at notillgrowers.com. All right. Thanks, you all. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I wanted to do a little rundown of what the first month doing this show has been like, because as someone who has created a lot of content in his day, I had never tried anything like this, really. And so far, it has been one of the best and most rewarding challenges I've ever put myself through, and also the most difficult, emotionally, physically. It's been wild, but I have to say that I am thoroughly enjoying it, and I hope you all are too. The numbers do tell me that you are, which is cool. The Patreon page definitely tells me you're into it, or at least people are down to hear their name completely botched at the end of an episode. That feels very cool to see, because the for real, honest truth was I had no idea how this show was going to go over. None at all. That's the thing about trying new ideas. It's not 100% a gamble, but it kind of is. I believed the farming/gardening world would enjoy a daily show. I thought I could possibly pull one off, but until you've tried it, figured out all the technical elements, managed the psychological barriers like doubt, and figured out how to get it all done before lunch every day, it's hard to know how it will go. However, I found that when you're enjoying something or when you're passionate about something, people will engage with it and get involved with it. Impossible to say how many people, of course, but some will often, at very least, glance over at what you're up to. And I use that word involved quite intentionally here, because you all have been really involved with this show. I love the comments section. I love the discussions going on there. The messages have been great. Even, at least most, of the criticisms have been really thoughtful and helpful. Sure, there are people who have unreal expectations about what a single person can possibly be capable of on their own. And then there are people who actively hate the theme song, which I plan to tell that story of the theme song someday soon, because yes, it's weird, but also yes, that's kind of the point. That'll make sense someday. But then there's the rest of you offering insight and contributing and asking great questions and giving thoughtful feedback. It's very cool. And I feel a lot of responsibility to deliver day after day and be as accurate as humanly possible, while also feeling a lot of leeway to be human, which is good given that is what I technically classify as. It certainly took me a few weeks, but I feel like I am in a bit of a rhythm now, with this being my 24th episode already somehow. And as long as you all will stick around, then I will keep going. I can't even promise that every episode will be good or helpful or smart, or that I won't repeat things I've already said or occasionally contradict others, but I can guarantee that unless we all collectively decide otherwise, there will be a new episode nearly every week for the foreseeable future, which feels like a win. For me, it's fun and it's educational. I think I got into content creation to begin with because I liked teaching. And I like teaching because it's an amazing way to force yourself to learn new things and explore both what you already believe and what is new out there in the trade. I don't recommend content creation for everyone, and it is not anywhere near as lucrative as it once was, especially for the amount of work it takes. But I do think it's a good thing to try and share what you do in some way, anyway, whether that's presenting at a conference or keeping a Substack or just writing your systems down for yourself or your employees. Sharing is about sharing, sure, but sharing is also about refining and challenging yourself and your own ideas. Nothing will humble you faster than sharing. You actually have to look at what you're doing or what you believe and question whether or not it works and makes sense. All that to say, I really appreciate you listeners and watchers for keeping me focused on trying to get it right, to be as accurate as I can and putting up with my dad jokes, dry humor, nerdery, digressions, all the stuff. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'll finish with a Friday field note. But first, thank you all for another great week and a great first month. Welcome to November. I'll see you all back here Monday with a report from the soccer tournament weekend, hopefully a positive one. Huge thanks to Willie Breeding for the perpetually polarizing theme song. Thank you to the crew at No-Till Growers for their support. Thank you to everyone who has been listening and engaging and subscribing and following, and especially those who have moseyed over to the Patreon page to sign up, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or heck, let's just keep it rolling for another month. If you sign up in the month of November, you get a shout out on the show because I'm enjoying doing them. So big shout outs today to, gotta get myself prepared here. Oh, it's a big list today. All right. Bill King, Byron Green, Chris Yates, Stephen Smith, Chris Henshaw, Joanna Schnerman, Lynn Tompkins, Pierre-Anne Lachance at Yellowbird Creek Restoration Farm, Rusty, Ben McQuay. Oh, these names are starting to sound like an action thriller. I think this is where we're going with this one. This one is, there's a lot of names here, so it's going to have to be more of like a TV series. But I think Ben McQuay, you may be the star here. A name like Ben McQuay, I don't see anybody beating that one. Brad Liston, Wonderful Tiny Farm, where it all goes down. Kristen Woschlagel. Kristen is like the agent in charge of everything. Let's see who else we got here. Meredith Light from Granite Springs Farm. Polly. Livsring Ved Silgen. Okay, no, I'm nailing this one. Livsring Ved Silji Heisted. I mean, clearly the antagonist, right? Gotta be. Eric Rutan, John Repko, and Jamie Chevalier. This is going to be a great show, you all. I feel like there's going to be a lot of action. There's going to be a lot of farms involved. I mean, all this stuff has to take place at a farmer's market, clearly. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing it. Tell me when the trailer's out. Otherwise, you all have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Thanks for watching or listening. Bye. So I'm out cleaning up some of the stuff that's just like laying around the farm. You know, just things I put down at some point and they got gobbled up by nature. And I will probably end up doing like 10 Friday field notes about how much I enjoy this. I just like, you'll just see stuff sticking up in some grass and you'll be like, I really need to get that out of the grass, but you don't have time all season. And then the season finally sort of ends and you get to do it. And the satisfaction of that, it's the best. And so next week I will do this exact same note. Until then, you all have a great weekend. See you Monday. Bye.